Hello and welcome to the Ayew Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenborough, and in today's podcast I'll be looking over the game against West Ham but bringing you my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you interviews with Roy Hodgson, Jordan Ayew and James McCarthy after the game. So let's begin. Crystal Palace buried their ghosts with their recent record in East London on Saturday, pulling themselves from behind to win 2-1 over an in-form West Ham United. Despite a gladiatorial build-up to kick-off and in stark contrast to its concluding drama, Saturday's game began at a steady pace, with West Ham enjoying the lion's share of possession. Seemingly happy to soak up the home side's pressure in the opening 10 minutes, Crystal Palace stemmed confidence from the off, appearing assured by their solid start to the season. With calm passing passages linking up the back four, midfield and spearhead of Jordan Ayew, Palace looked comfortable in defence and composed in attack, with a successful of back kills coolly connecting Patrick Van Aanholt and Jeffrey Slop. The Eagles' settled approach almost bore through, having lulled the hosts into switching off, causing the fans inside the London Stadium to collectively hold their breath, when Joe Ward broke into the box on the end of a James McCarthy loft across field. Beating Felipe Anderson to the byline, Ward, who celebrated his 200th league appearance for Palace, poked a dangerous ball across the face of goal. However, no one in white was alert enough to the sudden threat and the cross went unanswered. After a nondescript opening half an hour where neither side enjoyed a clear-cut chance, the game burst into life with Yarmolenko overtaking Martin Kelly inside the visitors' box. Squaring the ball, Yarmolenko seemed to have secured the Hammers' opening goal, but the split-second reactions of Vicente Gaeta forced Sebastian Haller's point-blank shot from the goal line and kept the scores level. With momentum carrying them, West Ham went on an offensive against the dazed Palace side and only failed to take the lead due to a wasteful Anderson. The first chance the Brazilians squandered saw the ball spin across the penalty area as Anderson struck from 8 yards and then, barely a minute later, a relieved Gaeta enveloped the ball from the number 8 soft diving header. After a nervy spell on the back foot, Palace regained their composure. And so it was to the other end of the pitch, the Eagles back in the game's driving seat. Wilfred Zaha the man at the wheel. Jinking his way to the byline, the Ivorian fooled the home defence, the speed Slop masterfully. Reacting in tight space and with little time, Slop could only thud the ball softly from his boot, so, with it sailing towards the net, Ryan Fredericks had time to race back and launch a goal-bound effort to safety. East London was to hold its breath again shortly after, when Anderson sent a teasing cross into Palace's 6-yard box. In an awkward position, Gary Cahill stretched and struck the ball away. However, his harsh clearance cannoned off the unaware Haller before ricocheting to safety off the similarly oblivious Gaeta. Closing out the evening's first exchanges, James McCarthy tried his luck from distance with an outswinging drive being pushed away by Roberto, who had until then been inactive. On Michael Oliver's whistle though, the game remained locked. Returning for the second half, West Ham wasted another chance to take the lead when the ball bounced off Ward's thigh to Ogbonga inside the box. Possibly the wrong man in the right place, the centre-back struck over from 6 yards out. But the Hammers weren't to miss another golden opportunity and eventually took the lead for Haller, who had looked troubling throughout the game. With Yarmolenko feeding Frederick down the right wing, Haller only had to pull home from close range following the fullback's cross, and Palace found themselves a goal down. But the Eagles wouldn't be behind for long, and when Declan Rice raised his arm inside the box, Michael Oliver was forced into awarding a penalty. In the absence of captain, midfielder and designated penalty taker Luka Milivojevic, Palace instead relied upon Cahill, McCarthy and Van Aanholt, the latter of the three embodying Milivojevic's position from 12 yards and striking sweetly into the bottom left corner. The Eagles deserved a renewed grip on the game and, with the copper smog of the flare settling around the stadium, the chilled East London evening heated up. Late drama seemed inevitable and the tension of the London Stadium built steadily. Fittingly, drama was only seconds away. The Eagles may have thought they were low on luck minutes from full time when Ayew buried the ball into the back of the net only for his effort to be disallowed. But after a lengthy VAR check, the officials adjudged Ayew to have been onside and the visiting section of the London Stadium erupted. Their determined side had taken the lead. With barely minutes on the clock, Gaeta cushioned his gloves around a dying seconds Haller effort, and with that catch, Crystal Palace had pulled off a remarkable comeback. So I'm now going to move on to my player ratings, but before I start, don't forget you can follow us on both Twitter and Facebook at Crystal Palace for all the latest Palace news. So if you are someone like myself who does like to follow a vast array of Palace accounts, whether they be on Twitter or Facebook, then of course do head over to the respective sites and follow our accounts at Crystal Palace. Now obviously alongside your sort of general Palace news, whether that be about the academy, sort of ongoings within the club, injury news, things like that, we obviously do regularly update you with the latest transfer news. So if you are someone who, once again, like myself, does like to keep up to date with all the latest transfer news, whether that be players coming into the club, players linked to going outwards, and of course just anything really that links the transfer window to Palace, whether that be a domino effect where one player goes to another club, which may lead to a player from Palace going elsewhere or a player coming to Palace, whatever way you want to look at the transfer window, we've got you guys covered in terms of finding articles, sourcing them, and as soon as we find them, obviously putting it out for you guys on social media so you guys can see sort of what the latest news is regarding that. And of course alongside that we obviously do post interviews as well, so whether that be with players, with management, and really anybody really related to the club, we obviously do post their interviews on there. So if you do want a place obviously where you can get all the latest Palace news, obviously the transfer news as well, both ins and outs, as well as just interviews as well, of course follow our accounts there. And obviously, before and after games, we obviously give our opinions on the accounts, obviously after press conferences, giving sort of a prediction before the game when the lineups come out, sort of giving our thoughts on that. And of course, after the game, sort of the instant match reaction as well. So you've got a vast array of sort of different content. So if you are someone, once again, looking for a new account to follow, with news, with opinions, with transfers on it, then of course obviously give our accounts a follow there. Now obviously you guys obviously can feel free to share your opinion on there, but a great place for you guys to share your opinion is actually on the podcast itself. So if you are listening on YouTube, then do feel free to drop a comment below the video with your player ratings, obviously where you rate your players' performances from 1 to 10, and of course that's with 10 being the best. And given how good the performance was in the end in terms of the result, there's going to be quite a few high ratings this week, so I'll be interested to see if you guys comment below, obviously comparing your opinion to mine, just to see what we thought about the good result as a whole. Now, like I've said, even if you, or I say this week in week out, but even if you don't want to do your player ratings, obviously just comment below with your general views of the game. Obviously from a Palace perspective, we would have been happy with a draw from the game, but to get that goal from VAR, from it originally being disallowed and getting it so late in the game after coming back from 1-0 down, obviously it's a great result for us. And actually the performance, particularly in the midfield and obviously in goal, performances there were quite crucial to us getting the result, but also across the field it was a good sort of team performance, graft from the whole team, which ultimately led to us getting the result. And of course in a West Ham perspective, obviously if you look at them on YouTube, it looks like they feel like they have like a divine right to win. Obviously it's so disgraceful, all this, all that. At the end of the day, both teams played good. West Ham weren't, they were far from bad. They were actually very good at times in the game. It's just that when the moment came, we obviously had a chance, put the ball in the back of the net, and despite it being ruled offside originally, obviously VAR came in and said it was onside. So realistically, West Ham fans, obviously they're moaning, they're a little bit disappointed, they've had a great start to the season, but realistically the way they've got to look at it is just go, at the end of the day, it was two teams playing well up against each other. One of them got a late goal, it was us, and put it behind us. But like I've said, alongside your player ratings, just feel free to comment below with your general views of the game, because I'm sure there's going to be different views, particularly from West Ham fans. If they find themselves on the channel, they're going to be completely, I wouldn't say depressed at the result, I suppose, a little bit annoyed at the fact that they went 1-0 ahead but still let it slip. But obviously a Palace perspective, a good result nonetheless. And like I say, week in week out, obviously I want you guys to share your opinion in the comment section. It's just so that I can read through your comments, compare your opinion to my own, particularly with the player rating, seeing whether we thought players had sort of a similar performance point wise. And of course alongside that, it's just so that any other fans, whether they be West Ham or Palace fans, they obviously can come to the channel and obviously read what you guys have said, listen to me in the podcast, and once again just building that discussion, having a more vast, a more broader sort of opinion base. But like I said already, obviously feel free in the comment section below to obviously comment with your views, and also if there's any questions or anything you disagree with that I've said, of course also feel free to sort of query that below as well. Now, if you do want to follow any of the social media pages that I've mentioned or join the Facebook group, then do check all the links that will be in the description below. But I'm now going to move on to my player ratings, starting a goal with Vicente Gaeta, who I'm going to give it an 8 overall. Now, obviously, Gaeta is one of these players, I've talked about him week in, week out now, but he never fails to impress me, because this was yet another good performance from him. in terms of what he gave to the game, but also that sort of calming presence that he brings to the side, and that's why I've given him an 8 overall, because it's not just about his quality in terms of the goalkeeping, but just the way how he commands and he reads the game. Everything about his performances recently have been fantastic, but certainly the last sort of few games or so where we've obviously picked up these important wins, Gaeta has been really crucial to that. Now, there was one chance in particular quite early on in the game, that was from Sebastian Haller. Obviously the ball's been whipped into the box. Obviously Haller's sort of tried to sort of toe it and hoof it, right in front of Gaeta, and obviously that was from real close range, and Gaeta made himself big and obviously made sure that West Ham didn't score, which would have been a really easy goal for them. Obviously I think it was down Van Aanholt's side. Obviously once again I'll talk about him later, but he left a little bit too much room down that side. Obviously the ball's come in, Haller's right there, close range, literally 2-3 yards out, hit it goalwards, or toe poked it, whichever phrase you want to use. And of course Gaeta was there to make the save. And these are the sort of things which really stand out for me, because yes, Gaeta can make your routine saves, but when he makes the fantastic saves, they are fantastic. And I've seen people on Twitter go, yeah, but the ball was shot at him, and it's like, well, no, because he got into that position in the first place to be able to block the shot. It wasn't just luck, that save in particular from Haller. It was all about your positional play and your game awareness by obviously following the ball and being in the right place at the right time. So that one chance in particular sticks out for me, because it was a fantastic save in terms of getting in that position and obviously putting Haller's close range shot, obviously putting it out of danger really well. And then obviously late on in the game as well, we had another great save, to keep us in the game. Obviously, we'd just gone 2-1 up. Obviously, West Ham have pumped the ball into the box, and Gaeta was there, obviously, to punch the ball away from danger. And, considering, West Ham were going to be quite aggrieved by the fact that we got a penalty, obviously got the penalty, but also got that last minute-ish goal. It was 87 minutes or so, but we got that goal late in the game. They're going to be quite aggrieved, trying to put on the pressure, trying to get that equaliser. So once again, the fact that Gaeta stood up, made himself count, and obviously made that big telling contribution to keep West Ham out as they were searching for the equaliser was of course great to see again. But for me, the reason I've given him the 8 is obviously for his overall performance, the way he commanded his box, the way he obviously made these saves, and also just his overall game management in terms of being in the right place at the right time, doing the simple things right, as well as obviously making the fantastic saves. But for me, that point blank range save from Haller in particular really stands out for me, and that's one of the reasons, or the main reason I've given him the 8 is because I was so impressed with it. And like I said, there was another good save I suppose I might as well mention. Obviously from a clearance there was a slight deflection, and obviously once again Gaeta was hand to make a save. So loads of chances and opportunities West Ham had throughout the game, and if it weren't for Gaeta they probably would have scored them. So once again, just showing how crucial he is to the side here. Now obviously there was 2 occasions where there was a little bit of a lack of communication I suppose between him and Van Aanholt. Obviously nothing really came off of it, but I suppose I might as well put that in there as well. And obviously near the end, like I've said already, when West Ham were piling on the pressure, they were aggrieved from being 2-1 down. The fact that he was making these good saves up until that final whistle blew is really what resonates with me. Yes, he made some good saves, but the fact that he just done everything he could just to see the game out and make sure we could actually get that win was of course great to see as well. And in terms of West Ham's goal they scored to make it 1-0, can't really say much about that. It was mainly just a build up to it. It was a good build up from West Ham, but obviously midfielders not closing down the West Ham players quick enough. Van Aanholt allowing Fredericks to get down that flank and put the cross in. So actually, he couldn't really do anything about it, because it was a good strike from Haller and obviously a good build up as well. But the overall team should have done better there. So once again here, Gaeta, another fantastic performance, full of fantastic saves, good catches, good punches, and just his general play and communication with the rest of the back four and that organisation was great to see as well. So once again here, Vicente Gaeta, fully deserving of the 8 I've given him. So now I'm going to move on to the first player in our back four, and that is the right back Joe Ward, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now, before I go on to talk about his performance, I might as well say that it was his 200th league appearance for Palace at the weekend, so we've got to congratulate him there, and it really sort of cemented for me, really. Obviously, we know he's played quite a lot of games for Palace, but just hitting a milestone like that really highlights how much of a club legend he is, Obviously, last few seasons or so, he may not have been great and not up to the standard he has set previously, but the fact that he's, continued to play for us, continued to give his all, and, as we saw in this game here, on the occasion of the 200th appearance. The fact that he put in a relatively good performance as well was a nice way sort of to sum up the day, and obviously to put the cherry on the cake of actually hitting that milestone. So I thought I'd just put that in there, you know, the fact that it's, you know, he's obviously a legend already, but the fact that he's now hitting these milestones, and the fact that he just continues, even though he may not always be great, just continues to give his all for the team, of course, was great to see. Now, in terms of the first half, obviously there was one chance in particular where we don't normally see him attacking, but he found himself in an attacking position, put a really good ball midway through that first half into the box. Really dangerous ball, and, you know, say if that was Haller for West Ham on the end of it, as we saw with the chances he had, that, you know, from the West Ham midfielders creating for him, you know, he certainly would have scored it. But obviously for us, Ward's put in a fantastic ball, no one gambled on it, and obviously the chance went begging. But it was nice to see actually Ward play in a slightly more advanced position and actually put a cross in, you know, rather than being afraid, trying to pass it back or passing it to a winger. The fact that he's actually took it upon himself to actually just have a go, put the ball into the box. What's the worst that could happen is it be cleared. And obviously, unluckily for us, no one actually gambled on it in the first place, and it was easy for West Ham to deal with. Now, aside from that offensive work, which I was impressed with, I think he was just solid as ever, you know, doing what he had to do defensively, keeping West Ham quiet. And, you know, when you consider West Ham were threatening more down Van Aanholt side, and as we saw with the goal they scored, you know, there wasn't as much pressure on Ward as there was on Van Aanholt on the other side. Now, there was a blatant foul that he made on Felipe Anderson that he picked up a yellow card for, but I'm not really going to use that as a dampener for his performance, because, like I said, he'd done the basics right, done what he had to do for the team, and also showed a few glimpses here and there of actually the attacking contribution he can bring to the side. So I do think overall the 6 is a fair result. And, you know, like I've said, obviously we know West Ham players, you know, particularly their wingers, are quite difficult to deal with, and whilst he had quite a lot to deal with, it wasn't as much as, say, Van Aanholt had down that other side. But, you know, like I've said, the fact that he dealt with it relatively well, the fact that the goal they scored didn't really come down his side, because obviously it was the midfielders who should have been closing down the players down that right side of the pitch. So the fact that he just done what he had to do, went about his business, nothing spectacular, and just overall just a solid job is what really impressed me. And, you know, I think I probably could have given him a 7 if it wasn't for the fact that he picked up that yellow card. But, you know, looking at the game overall, the fact that he got forward, putting a few good balls into the box, you know, the fact that he done relatively decent job, you know, particularly up against Anderson, who's not an easy player to deal with. So the fact that he was able to overcome that challenge and play as well as he did, both defensively and offensively, is what I was impressed with, and certainly why I think he deserves the 6 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to the first of our 2 centre-backs, and I'm going to start with Gary Cahill, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now, before I go on to talk about his overall performance, I might as well say that obviously in the absence of Milivojevic, who of course picked up 5 yellow cards and obviously has a 1-match ban, obviously Gary Cahill came in the place of him, obviously was the captain for the day, and he done a relatively good job, not only defensively but actually in terms of taking that captaincy upon himself and actually, you know, giving his all for the team. That's something that he did, and something which of course reflected in the score I've given him. Now, obviously it wasn't a surprise because he was obviously captain at Chelsea. I think he captained England at points under Roy Hodgson, and we know he's got the leadership qualities anyway, so it was just the right decision to put him in there to be the captain. And the fact that he not only obviously it's his first time doing it, but the fact that he took it upon himself and continued to play as well as he has been doing, as well as, you know, taking that captaincy upon himself, was of course great to see. And, you know, obviously people have been now begging the question as to, you know, whether he should keep the captaincy because he had such a good performance. Personally, for me, obviously you don't want to not put your captain back as the captain, you know, after, you know, yes, he's missed a game, but, you know, you don't want to upset the morale there. But certainly it's nice to know that we've actually got someone in the defence who's got that leadership qualities, who obviously not only to organise the back four, but of course can step up to the plate, as we saw at the weekend, and obviously command the team as a whole. So I just thought I'd put that in there because I do think, you know, having that captaincy on you can sometimes be a burden for players, but as we saw when he was at Chelsea, you know, he relishes that opportunity of commanding the side, and it was nice to see sort of them leadership qualities shown in the game here. Now, I've given him a 7 overall because I was fairly impressed with how he defended throughout the whole game, and, you know, in terms of the early periods of the game, West Ham were putting quite a lot of pressure on us, attacking us sort of as soon as the first whistle went. So obviously they were playing with quite high intensity. So the fact that Cahill was there not only to make challenges and to restrict them, but the fact that he controlled the defence well by obviously taking the ball off them, regaining possession or making challenges, and, you know, them regaining the ball and driving forward. Everything about what he was doing in that defensive line, whether that be obviously the tackling, the challenges, or just actually driving the ball forward, retaining possession. Everything about his game was excellent in the game, and particularly early on, where obviously West Ham were in the ascendancy, the fact that we were able to overcome that was obviously down to people like Cahill and Kelly obviously dealing with that threat as well as they did obviously that West Ham posed. And you've got to look at some of the chances West Ham had in the early periods and go, actually, Cahill was quite crucial to us not conceding there, because he was the guy making the composed challenges. And these are not sort of your last ditch challenges where you do it and you're quite lucky the ball just deflects and goes out, or you just get a lucky foot on the ball to kick it away. These were proper composed challenges, timing it exactly right, getting the ball out of danger into the right position. Everything about it was excellent. So it wasn't just sort of just clearing the ball or headering the ball away. The fact that everything about it was composed, whether that be bringing down the ball, knowing the right time to clear, right time to play out from the back, everything about his defensive performance is something really that did impress me. Now, overall, I've given him that 7 because obviously of how well he defended, and even though I've given him higher ratings in the last few weeks, I just think this was just a game where he just done the basics right. Well, not the basics right, but he done what he had to do for the team, plus he was the captain, and I think the fact that he was able to overcome that was of course great to see. Now for me overall, just to summarise, the fact that he showed great leadership, great organisation in the back four, that is something that of course you want to see from your captain, but in particular from your captain, but obviously if you're going to be that mainstay, the main guy in that back four, you've got to make himself count. So the fact that he had the leadership part, obviously from being the captain for the day, but also was able to still continue as he always does by just having that organisation in the back four, was of course great to see. And for me, the thing to finish really is that obviously we know how good he is, the experience he's got, the quality he's got, but the fact that when he plays well, he sort of brings the best out of the other players around him as well, is something that impressed me. So you've got someone like Ward and someone like Van Aanholt, two players who sometimes have the odd mistake in them, but you've got someone like Cahill with that experience and with that knowledge around them, just seems to obviously up their performance. And obviously if you've got other players around him playing better, then obviously it's going to help the whole team's performance as a whole. So once again here, a good performance from Gary Cahill, and certainly fully deserving of the 7 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to his centre-back partner, and that is Martin Kelly, who I'm also going to give a 7 overall. Now in terms of Kelly's performance, there was one moment in particular which really stands out for me, and that was obviously one challenge he made on Yarmolenko. Obviously Yarmolenko had a chance to go through on goal, and obviously Kelly was there to put in that crucial foot on the sort of 18-yard line or so, and obviously stop that chance and kill it right dead. And the reason that really stands out for me is the fact that obviously we know West Ham had loads of chances throughout the game, but that one in particular could have made it 1-0, could have been a whole different story. So the fact that you've got someone like Kelly there, obviously as a whole defensively he done alright, but at the key moment when it really mattered, he was able to get into the right position and put the foot in, time everything right, is something that really did impress me. And it once again goes back to what I've been saying week in, week out. It's really good to see we've got someone who's really reliable at the back and can obviously pull things like that challenge out the bag to obviously help the team as a whole. But like I've said, Yarmolenko could have easily gone through and scored from that opportunity, but the fact that Kelly, as he done throughout the whole game, but that moment in particular, timed everything right and got it to perfection to ensure that obviously we weren't punished from that chance. Now in terms of a bit of an attacking contribution, obviously you wouldn't expect this from a centre-back, but of course with Jordan Ayew's goal, it was actually Martin Kelly who was the guy who headed it back down to him. Obviously we obviously delivered the free kick, the ball got pinned around a bit, obviously Andros Townsend picked up on the edge of the area, whipped in the cross, and obviously Kelly was the guy who jumped the highest out of any of the players, headed the ball into Ayew's path, and of course Ayew went through to score. And obviously on VAR, and obviously why it was flagged off offside, originally it was obviously down to the fact that it looked like Martin Kelly may have been offside when he played the ball, but obviously as we saw with VAR, corrected the decision because of course the West Ham player was obviously playing Kelly onside, which meant that Ayew was also onside, obviously to score that chance. So the fact that Martin Kelly was able to combine that defensive work and that defensive solidity, as well as making these crucial challenges, on top of the fact that he obviously got the assist which got us the win and helped us get another 3 points on the board, is something that really did impress me here. Now obviously you're looking at the assist going, you know, it's nice to see you actually contributing up the pitch, and obviously it's nice to see actually a defender on their own obviously get an assist, because it shows, you know, you're contributing not only to the defensive work of the team, but actually I think on the whole, I think Kelly's distribution was really good. You know, it wasn't just for the goal where he obviously pinpointed that header perfectly to Ayew. It was actually in terms of, you know, driving the ball out from the back, carrying the ball forward, maintaining possession. Everything about his overall play, not just the assist, but everything about his sort of out of field play really did impress me, and in particular, of course, the distribution. And you know, you've got to look at someone like Wilshere, who, when he played for Arsenal, certainly caused Palace quite a lot of problems. The fact that you know, that yes, there may have been a few times where he got around him a little bit far too easily, you know, towards the end of the game. But the fact that on the whole, I think Kelly done a relatively good job up against, you know, people like Yarmolenko and Anderson, and of course Wilshere when he was on the pitch, you know. Or when he was in and around Kelly, you know, the fact that he was able to deal with these players as well as he did, even though yes, they may have got around him a few times, but the fact that he had that recovery, or he had that ability just to deal with them, was obviously great to see as well. And I think on the whole, like I said with Gary Cahill, in terms of the clearances, I think Martin Kelly was just as efficient at it, you know, making these good clearances, making sure, you know, whether it was the right time just to pump the ball long or to play the ball out from the back, you know, having that good decision making, helping us to retain possession or just to clear the danger. The fact that he got that right, as well as just his overall defensive work as well, was something which of course really impressed me. So once again here, Martin Kelly fully deserving of the 7, obviously for that crucial challenge on Yarmolenko, obviously providing the cross for Jordan Ayew's goal, but obviously mainly for me just his overall defensive performance. So I'm now going to move on to the last player in our back 4, and that is the left back Patrick Van Aanholt, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now, like I mentioned earlier on, in terms of, you know, where West Ham were attacking, obviously most of their attacks were coming down our left hand side, which obviously meant that Van Aanholt had quite a lot to deal with throughout the game, and the fact that I've given him a 7 really sort of highlights, at least for me, you know, the fact that he was able to overcome the challenge on most occasions. Now, of course, there's going to be a lot of criticism for him in the fact that the goal that West Ham scored came down his side, and he made it far too easy for Fredericks to obviously make the run and put the cross in. But if you put that mistake aside from the goal we conceded, he actually had a fairly decent performance defensively. Now, obviously West Ham, like I've said already, started the game quite fast, and much of their early play seemed to come down Van Aanholt's side, and it was mainly sort of Yarmolenko down West Ham's right who was obviously causing problems for us. But the fact that Van Aanholt was one of these players who, yes, he may have left a little bit too much space in and around them, but when he was able to overcome that and able to obviously defend well against them, and then obviously start up attacks off the back of that, you know, this is something I like about his play. Now, generally, you know, if you're looking at his ability to defend against certain players, and obviously Yarmolenko is an example of that, I felt he dealt with them well enough. You know, yes, he may not have been great because, once again, leaving too much space in and around them, but the fact that he was still able to deal with them, and the fact that they only scored from one of their chances, only scored the 1 goal, sort of highlights, for me at least, the fact that, yes, that one time you should have been switched on and shouldn't have let Fredericks make a run in, but for the majority of the game, up against your Yarmolenkos, your Andersons, he done a fairly decent job aside from that. And I suppose what you've got to look at is the fact that West Ham were obviously looking to exploit the space between Van Aanholt and obviously Gary Cahill. They were obviously looking to exploit that. So the fact that he'd done relatively well to sort of counteract that, and, you know, obviously, like I said, other than the goal we conceded, you know, for the majority of the game, just keeping his shape, keeping his position, and just making life difficult by being that defensive unit, obviously is something I was fairly impressed with. Now, in terms of, you know, one of the main reasons I've given him a 7, obviously the fact that he scored a fantastic penalty, and once again, you know, I talked about Gary Cahill stepping up in the absence of Milivojevic to be the captain. Obviously, Van Aanholt was the guy to step up and obviously take the penalty, and it was a great penalty as well, because we know, obviously, with the way we got the penalty, you know, it was a clear penalty anyway, but obviously with all of the 60,000 odd West Ham fans, you know, shouting at you, and the fact that you're not normally a penalty taker, there was a lot of pressure on him, but the fact that he kept his cool, placed it beautifully into the bottom corner, you know, obviously, and to obviously make sure he converted it so shortly after we had conceded, you know, 10 minutes or so, we had to get that first goal. We done that, and obviously that sort of started our momentum, obviously, going towards the end of the game. So the fact that he made no mistake from the spot made up for the absence of Milivojevic, and obviously with all of that pressure and, you know, basically all of the pressure isn't really for anything else, because that's all you're thinking when you're not normally a penalty taker. You're going up to take it. All that's going on in your mind is, come on, I've got to score this, got to score this, and you've got people booing you. So the fact that he done as well as he did and scored as good as a penalty you're going to get, you know, bottom corner, loads of power, great accuracy, goalkeeper has no chance. Everything about it was excellent, and certainly it's nice to see we've got another option in terms of penalty takers. We've got someone who we've seen quite clearly could obviously have a really accurate shot on him. Now, like I've said already, you know, maybe people may say I'm rating him too highly, giving him a 7 overall, and you know, you've got to look at it and go, yes, the goal came down his side, but he scored that nice penalty, and that's why really overall I've given him a 7. Now, in the second half, there was one interception in particular that I was quite impressed with. Can't remember who exactly it was off of, but, you know, nonetheless, you know, little contributions here and there, you know, nicking the ball off the opposition, driving forward, you know, having chances to put crosses into the box. Little things like this obviously make up for little mistakes like he made for the goal. And it was obviously nice to see, you know, his contribution both defensively and offensively on the whole at the weekend being relatively good. And of course, you've got to look at our penalty, obviously, that we got awarded. Obviously, we know that Aanholt he scored it, but he was also involved in terms of, it was his cross put into the box, which of course forced, I think it was Rice to handball it, which obviously led to us getting the penalty. So not only was he involved in the penalty in terms of scoring it, but he was the guy who instigated it by putting the ball into the box in the first place. So once again here, Patrick Aanholt, a very solid defensive performance, obviously fully deserving of the 7. Obviously, in terms of the threat he was up against, he dealt with Yarmolenko relatively well. Obviously, other than the goal we conceded, I think the gap between him and Gary Cahill, he filled in quite nicely. And of course, you know, going forward as well, in terms of getting in good positions, putting crosses into the box, as well as scoring the penalty. Overall summarise, which was overall sort of summarises his overall sort of good performance, and certainly one that does deserve the 7 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to the first player in the midfield, and that is James McCarthy, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now, in terms of McCarthy's performance, you know, I was actually quite surprised not to see him start the game, but how long he actually stayed in the field, because when you consider in the last sort of 2-3 seasons or so, he hasn't actually had that many minutes on the field. So it was actually really great to see him actually play as long as he did. So for that alone, I've obviously given him a 6. But his overall performance, you know, the fact that he hasn't played a sustained period of time for such a long time, the fact that he actually showed some of the good sort of qualities he can bring to our midfield throughout the game here against the quality of the opposition he did was of course great to see. Now, there were quite a few times, you know, particularly in the first half, where I thought he was showing quite nice flashy feet in terms of maintaining possession, you know, getting past players, dribbling past them, driving forwards. So, you know, the fact that someone who hasn't played that much is able to still show their quality in terms of when they're on the ball, what they can do with the ball, is something which of course impressed me. And in terms of just overall possession, I think he was fairly comfortable on the ball, you know, in terms of not being phased by players around him, people like Mark Noble in the midfield up against him. That didn't really faze him. He was able to maintain possession, be really comfortable on the ball, and of course do some good with it as well. Now, of course, obviously throughout the game he did have a slight altercation with Mark Noble. Obviously not much really to read into this anyway, but of course they both clattered into each other, and of course Mark Noble sort of stood on his shoulder as such, you know, not really, there's not going to be no respective action or anything, it's just sort of a coming together. But I suppose after that, obviously someone who's very injury prone in McCarthy, that obviously didn't knock him completely, but certainly, given the fact that he started the game and he was playing as well as he did, had a slight sort of hamper on his overall performance. But then after that, the fact that he just got straight up and obviously put in a decent challenge after that, and just didn't let that thing with Mark Noble actually get the better of him, just continued to do what he could, and the fact that literally straight after put in a really decent challenge just shows that obviously the defensive qualities he of course can bring to our midfield. And you know, once again, going back to the absence of Luka Milivojevic, we needed someone to come into the midfield and stand up and make themselves count. Obviously we had McCarthy playing slightly more deeper than he normally would do, but someone as well, you know, someone who obviously came in and made an impact was McCarthy. Everyone thought he was going to start anyway, but the fact that he started and done as well as he did in terms of just controlling the midfield, containing West Ham, that is something which overall I was really impressed with. Now, obviously overall defensively I think he had a good job, and obviously offensively he was very comfortable on the ball. But actually there was one attacking chance in particular which stood out for me, Obviously, he's not someone known for scoring loads of goals, but he actually had an effort, sort of had a go from 20 yards or so. Yes, it was well saved, but it's nice to see your midfielders just having a go from, 20 yards or so, because the worst that can happen is it goes completely wide or the goalkeeper makes a save. But of course, sometimes we know we don't score a lot of goals, so sometimes we just need to have that confidence to just say, whatever will be. I'm just going to try and hit it from here. Whatever will happen. And it was nice to see actually someone just take that initiative and just have a go, rather than just passing the ball out and trying to sort of get chances in and around the box. It's nice to see us actually taking these shots and creating chances from, sort of in and around the area, rather than literally right in the penalty area. Now, overall, I do think the 6 is a fair result when you consider the fact that he done his job defensively. Offensively, was able to bring the ball forward, but there weren't necessarily any moments of real quality. It's just the fact that he went about his shift, done what he had to do for the team. And like I said at the beginning, the fact that he hasn't played that many or this many sustained sort of games, coming off the bench and playing, quite a huge chunk of this game here minute wise, the fact that he was able to do that after being out for so long and do it as well as he did, which is something that of course did impress me. So I do think overall James McCarthy here fully deserving of the 6 I've given him. So now I'm going to move on to his counterpart, and that is of course James McArthur, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. So yeah, again, I sort of mentioned him a few minutes ago, but he was a guy who really did step up in the absence of Milivojevic, and I suppose he could warrant maybe giving him an 8 overall for his overall performance. And it's mainly just to the fact that normally he'd play slightly more advanced, but actually in this game here he played obviously deeper in the absence of Milivojevic and done a superb job of that, not only in terms of containing West Ham, but breaking up their play, disrupting the passes and the movement that West Ham were trying to do, as well as just literally winning back the ball and driving forward as well, and using them sort of more attacking instincts that we know he's got. And it does beg the question in this game here, where actually McArthur sort of had a hot and cold season where he's been good some days, he's been less so others, but he's been fairly consistent for us, and when he's missing, you notice the difference. So maybe him, because he played so well here against West Ham, maybe it might be time to transition him slightly further back to maybe play alongside Milivojevic, because that defensive contribution that McArthur made here at the weekend as a defensive midfielder, who really went lengths to show the quality he could potentially bring, playing a little bit more deeper than he normally would do. But what you've got to look at is that the fact that West Ham, we know they're an attacking team, we obviously had to sit quite deep to obviously contain them and to be able to deal with the threats that people like Anderson and people like Yarmolenko have. So the fact that McArthur sat very, very deep throughout the game and often looked like another central defender, in terms of just giving that shield into the back four, that obviously worked into our advantage, because it made it very difficult for West Ham to break us down. And just having the extra man in front of the back four, you don't realise how much of a difference it makes until it's really effective. And this game here was a classic example where McArthur, doing his job, playing defensively, breaking up play, or the opposition's play, really did work a treat for us on the day. Now, of course, you've got to look at the negatives of that and go, because he was playing so deep, yes, he was effective there, but it obviously negated the good contribution he can normally make offensively, because we did sort of miss his engine in terms of covering a lot of ground and getting in and around good positions in and around the box. So we slightly missed that in terms of our upfield play, but at the end of the day, his main job in the team was to replace Milivojevic and just be that solid defensive rock in front of the back four. So the fact that he done that, and the fact that it didn't really punish us really in terms of missing that option further up the field, because we had people like McCarthy and Chiarte just playing there, and obviously Slop towards the later end of the game. So the fact that he was playing slightly deeper didn't really hinder how we could attack in the game. It was just more to the fact that, yes, he was playing so good defensively, but it would have been nice to see a little bit more of his attacking work, even though that's not what he was told to do in the game, or what it looked like he was told to do. It's just the fact that we probably missed his engine, because just having that little bit more pace and a bit more energy, let's say, not really pace, but more energy and more physicality slightly further up the field, could have made it an even better contest overall. But like I said, he doesn't really normally play in this defensive role, but the fact that he worked hard for the team, and you could actually physically see that in the way he was playing, and the fact that he was quite a number of times always I say a number of times, I think nearly every time West Ham were on the offensive, he was in the right place at the right time, doing what he had to do to defend against them. So it wasn't just about him just being in the that shield in front of the back four, but in terms of the game management and game awareness, in terms of adapting his positions, moving across and just dealing with whatever West Ham are trying to throw at us. The fact that he done that so well is something which really did impress me. So for me, overall, I do think the 7 is a fair result. And, you know, it's something we've got to consider. We've got to consider playing him slightly further deeper because he showed how effective he was in this game. And certainly it'd be something nice to see in the games coming up in the future. But for me, the fact that he broke up West Ham's attacks so nicely and so efficiently is obviously the main reason why I was happy with his performance. So I'm now going to move on to the final player in our midfield, obviously depending on which way you look at our formation, and that is of course Cheikhou Kouyaté, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now once again, this is a player coming back to his old team. Obviously we've had it a few times this season. Obviously Townsend up against Tottenham, obviously Zaha against United, you know, so we've had players coming up against their old clubs, and sometimes their performances may have been hindered because of that. Kouyaté was one of these players who, up against his old club in West Ham, didn't really let that faze him and put in a fairly decent, solid performance. You know, something we've come to expect from him in the midfield. So I do think on reflection, the 6 is a fair result. Now, for me, I was really impressed with his ability to carry the ball forward. Of course, because McCarthy was playing slightly further deeper, it was Kouyaté who actually took it upon himself to play slightly further forward. And I think on every opportunity we had possession or we had the chance to break into West Ham's half of the pitch, Kouyaté was that guy in the middle of the field to do that. So it was really nice to see him actually be able to carry the ball across the halfway line into West Ham's territory and of course do stuff with it. And you know, what you've got to look at is that obviously we know West Ham are good and they could hit us on the break, but equally if we've got someone like Kouyaté who can carry the ball forward and actually break through West Ham, that obviously allowed us to obviously get people like Ayew and Zaha and Slup to obviously release them to create chances for themselves. And not only was he a threat in terms of just driving down the middle, but from set pieces as well, he showed the quality he's got. You know, number of times we put the balls into the box, and Kouyaté could be one of these guys to obviously get on the end of it, and even if he wasn't on the end of it, he could be, you know, dragging one player out to create more space. So from set pieces, he always seemed to cause problems there, which of course was great to see. So the fact that he combined that sort of engine of a midfield performance, that tenacity, using his energy, using his physicality, the fact that he had that in the midfield, as well as obviously getting on the end of chances as well, was of course great to see. Now in particular in the first half, he was one of the players I was most impressed with, and that's just because West Ham were in the ascendancy. You know, both Palace and West Ham were playing good in the first half, but West Ham obviously had the upper hand. And for me, I think Kouyaté was a great presence in that first half. The fact that he made himself count, he was making life difficult for West Ham, he was using that tenacity to drive forward. So everything about his first half was really impressive, and certainly I wanted to pick that out because of course he's one of these players in a half of football where West Ham were in the ascendancy, but certainly he really stood out for me. And I suppose he even looked like scoring on a few occasions as well. So the fact that you've got someone who can use their tenacity, use their energy in the midfield to drive forward, as well as coming back and using that physicality for the defensive work, as well as causing problems on set pieces, and then even then when you're playing slightly further forward, you've got chances of scoring. You look like you're getting into good, or you are getting into good positions where it looks like you might have a chance to score. So the fact that everything about his performance epitomises what you would expect from a midfielder was of course great to see. And arguably, when you put it like that, you probably could give him a 7, but I've given him a 6 overall because, you know, once again he was lacking these sort of real key moments in the game where you'd go, you know, that won us the game or that stopped West Ham from scoring, and that probably would have got him a 7. But just because of his overall performance, he was very consistent, done what he had to do, is obviously why I've given him a 6. And you know, you've got to look at the penalty obviously West Ham conceded. Obviously the ball's come into the box, and it was obviously Kouyaté's touch of the ball which obviously put it towards Rice, and obviously Rice put his hand up and of course won us the penalty from his handball. So even when he wasn't really trying to make an impact, you know, just that little touch on the ball flicked it onto Rice's hand, and of course led to us getting the penalty. So little things like that is what impressed me. But like I've said, there was no real outstanding moments in the game, just that sort of consistency of really good solid performance throughout the game is why I've given him the 6 overall. So I'm now going to move on to winger or midfielder, depending on what time of the game you're looking at, and that is of course Jeffrey Slup, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. So obviously towards the beginning of the game, obviously with us playing a sort of 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3 formation, obviously Jeffrey Slup started sort of wide on the left hand side, and then obviously towards the end of the game with the introduction of people like Townsend off the bench, obviously meant that Jeffrey Slupp moved to a more central role. Now, wherever he was playing throughout the game, I think he done a fairly decent job, and that's why I've given him a 6 overall, because much like Kouyaté, there were no real key outstanding moments in the game from him, but the fact that whether he was playing out wide or down the middle, he just gave his all for the team and done what he had to do. Now, I suppose the phrase you could use is a typical performance, because that's exactly what it was, because there was lots of hard work from Slupp, lots of pace running up and down the flanks, but there wasn't really no quality there in terms of the set pieces or balls into the box or creating opportunities there. So whilst that was lacking in his performance, you can't fault him for not putting in the hard work, because that's certainly, combined with his pace, that's something we did see throughout the game. And obviously with him playing on the left wing, you want him to be that main outlet to the side, and that's why I've given him a 6, because I was a little bit disappointed not to see him create more or create even chances of note in the game. Whether it be 1 or 2 good chances and you have 10 other not so good chances, I'd rather have that than see not actually much of note throughout the whole game as a whole. But looking at his performance, I suppose going into the second half, I think once again a 6 is a fair result based on both halves. I think he made some good runs, he linked up well with Zaha and Ayew depending on where he was playing, but I just think on the whole we could have seen a little bit more from him, because obviously the first half, obviously with West Ham being in the ascendancy, obviously was more focused on them, and then in the second half when we were in the ascendancy, when we had the momentum, it would have been nice just to see someone like Jeffrey Slupp done what someone like Yarmolenko or Anderson did, take it upon themselves to run down the flank and cause problems for the opposition. But instead, Jeffrey Slupp had a sort of milder performance in comparison to the opposition players, and it weren't necessarily bad, because it was far from bad. It just would have been nice to see a little bit more from his overall performance. But what you've got to also look at is the goal we conceded came down his side. Obviously it started on the opposite flank in terms of West Ham doing some nice pass and move, and then the ball gets to Fredericks. So you could say maybe the players on the other side should have done better, but I thought I'd just put that in there, a little sort of caveat thing, whatever, that Jeffrey Slupp maybe could have done a little bit better there. And I suppose he also had an effort which was cleared off the line as well. So yes, he may not have created much of note, but there was one chance, lovely bamboozling skill from Zaha to obviously get past two defenders, put the ball in, and literally from 2 yards out, Jeffrey Slupp can't really do anything more. He's just hit it first time, and of course Fredericks was there to obviously hit it off the line. So once again here, Jeffrey Slupp, a good performance from him, in terms of the defensive work and the offensive work. Maybe could have done better for the goal we conceded, and maybe could have done a little bit more offensively, because whilst he was making some good runs and showed good intent by linking up with Zaha and Ayew, just that little bit of end product or that little bit of quality to make that little spark to get in behind the opposition and have a chance for yourself, that was sort of what was missing in the game. So I do think overall, the 6 is a fair result. So now I'm going to move on to our man on the other side of the pitch, and that is of course Wilfried Zaha, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now once again, this may be one of the ratings that people may disagree with, only because we probably could have given him an 8 for his performance, because there were quite a number of moments of class we saw throughout the game, and actually his attacking contribution throughout the whole game was obviously really good. But I do think, on reflection, the 7 is a fair result based on the chances he had, the fact that West Ham limited him a few times, but also, like I said, the few chances he did have were good, and obviously we didn't capitalise on them as such, but it was nice to see actually that intent and that quality in itself. Now of course Aaron Cresswell was the player that Zaha was up against, and certainly there's been a bit of history between them, not in terms of any bad blood or whatever, but obviously it's always a good battle seeing whether Cresswell can deal with him and whether Zaha can get the better off of him. And I do think in this game in particular, he had the beating of him on a number of occasions, and it was all down to his magic feet in terms of mesmerising the opposition, getting past them, doing the step overs to get a few yards in front of them, and of course on a number of occasions he'd done that, got past the players and put balls into the box. So obviously, Cresswell didn't necessarily had a bad game as such, but in terms of Zaha, I think Zaha got the better of this sort of battle, one-on-one battle on this occasion. Now of course, obviously Zaha, with his magic feet, obviously created the best chance of that first half, and obviously Jordan Ayew didn't really capitalise on the chance, which was a little bit disappointing, but it was good to see actually we were able to create chances off the back of not penalties or not set pieces. So it was nice to see us actually get the ball to Zaha. He done his magic work, got the ball into Ayew, and obviously Ayew didn't capitalise, but that intent in the first place in terms of getting the ball into that position, getting the ball to your opposition, your teammate as well. That is obviously what you really would like to see. But like I've said, in that first half in particular, I think it was a really good battle up against him and Cresswell. And obviously, yes, there may not have been one moment you went, that is a fantastic piece of skill in that first half. We certainly saw that in the second half, where of course he created that chance for Jeffrey Slupp. Obviously in the first half, yes, Jordan Ayew didn't capitalise with that chance, and likewise, you could argue Jeffrey Slupp didn't, but given the fact that it was so quick, the movement was so quick, Zaha got to the byline, past two players, put the ball into the box. There isn't really much more Slupp could have done, because it was literally only a few yards away from him. He's obviously hit the ball first time, and yes, it was deflected off the, I say deflected off the line, it was hit off the line by Fredericks. Yes, that was the case, but much like with that Ayew chance, it was nice to see Zaha, or it was fantastic to see Zaha, in that second half, obviously get past as many defenders as he did, and then just to mesmerise him with the skill to put the ball into the box into the first place. And the word to use is majestic, because that's exactly what that piece of skill was. And yes, maybe Jeffrey Slupp could have hit it a bit differently, but like I've said, given how quickly it happened and how close he was to Zaha in the first place, he obviously done what he could, stuck a leg out. But of course, even though there was power on it, Frederick was already there to clear the danger. Now, on the whole, obviously, because Zaha was a constant threat and always causing problems for the West Ham back four, he obviously won us quite a lot of fouls, and that obviously seemed to annoy the West Ham fans, who are like, oh, Palace are free kick merchants, they're set piece merchants because Zaha wins all these free kicks, where in reality it was just because he was getting the better of the defenders, so they had to obviously resort to fouling him to obviously restrict them, it was all right, because they weren't bad fouls, they were just what a defender you would expect from a defender to do. But nonetheless, we won a lot of fouls, and that was down to Zaha's skill and basically him making life difficult for the opposition players. Obviously led to him conceding the fouls, because of obviously the skill he showed. Now, in terms of overall, do you think the 7 is a fair result? The fact that he worked hard, he showed his skill, he showed his pace, got the better of people like Cresswell throughout the game, and realistically, because of all this good work, he had 2 fantastic chances, or his teammates did. Obviously the first one Ayew could have done a little bit better with, and of course Jeffrey Slupp, like I said, maybe could have done better, but then on another day, Fredericks is not there to hit it off the line. So the fact that he worked hard and he created loads of chances and was unlucky that his teammates weren't able to convert them, I do think overall it was a really good performance from Zaha, and certainly one where he's now starting to fully get back into the season. He's now starting to get back to his old self, so hopefully in the next sort of few games or so we'll start to see him get back to the peak of how we saw him at the end of last season. So once again here, Wilfried Zaha fully deserving of the 7 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to the final player in our starting 11, and that is of course the striker Jordan Ayew, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now, what more can I say about this guy? He scored our goal in sort of the last few minutes of the game. Obviously originally called for offside, but VAR corrected it. Obviously great elations, great celebrations as that went in, and obviously got to give Ayew credit for actually running to the West Ham fans to celebrate in front of them. You've got to give him a bit of credit, and the fact that he's got the balls to do that in the first place just shows how much of he's sort of turning into a cult hero as such. Now, obviously if he didn't score that goal and it was disallowed and it was offside, he probably would have got a 6 overall, because of course his overall performance was good, but it wasn't quite up to the standards he's set recently. But the fact that he got the goal to show for his contribution he made throughout the rest of the game was of course great to see. Now, the thing that never really fails to impress me is his work rate, and that was exactly once again one of his better attributes here. Working hard for the team, running down the flanks, just causing problems for the opposition. That's exactly what we got from his performance. But on the negative side of that, he obviously struggled for opportunities. So whilst he was doing all of the good work, showing the good energy, when he actually came to taking the chances or creating the chances, that part of his game was lacking. So that's why I probably could have given him a 6. But like I said, the fact that he scored the goal, combined with the good intent and the good performance, is why I've given him a 7 overall. Now, he obviously nicked that one right at the death, and yes, obviously VAR made it a little bit hard for us, because we had that really anxious wait to see if it did go in. And you've got to look back at it and go, it was a really good goal, because yes, it was tight, and yes, VAR, there's going to be a debate as to whether it's onside or offside, whether it matters if it's millimetres difference. But nonetheless, the fact that it was a really good goal in terms of the ball in from Andros, the header down from Kelly, and of course, even though it's a really simple finish from Ayew from a few yards out, you know, you have to be in the right place, you have to be there at the right time, you have to time it right, you have to make sure you don't just get your foot under the ball and hoof it right over. So the fact that he was just managed to not let the occasion, sort of last few minutes or so, trying to get that second goal, the fact that he didn't let that get the better of him, finished that chance, and luckily VAR corrected the offside decision. That was of course great to see. So once again here, really good performance from Ayew, and you know, sort of continuing his form as he has done this season in terms of his good performances, but also getting his goal tally up to 3 for the season, obviously more than he got last season. So even though we know obviously from seeing him play that his performances have been better, but obviously on paper as well, the fact that his goals return is increasing and improving just shows how much of an improvement he's made over the last sort of few months or so. But once again, Jordan Ayew, fully deserving of this 7 I've given him. Worked hard for the team, got a great goal right at the death, and certainly, you know, yes, he probably could have done better on a few occasions, but for scoring that last-ish minute goal, you know, 87 minutes or so, that was of course great to see. So once again here, Jordan Ayew, fully deserving of the 7, and thank God we had VAR on the day. So I'm now going to move briefly on to the 2 substitutes we made in the game. Obviously, Andros Townsend, going to give him a 7 overall, and of course Christian Benteke, not really going to give him a rating as he wasn't on the pitch long enough. Now in terms of Townsend, obviously I've given him a 7 because he made a real positive impact off the bench. You know, he came off and straight away brought that energy, brought that pace, brought that quality into the side, which we obviously needed to break West Ham down and to get our second goal in the game. And it was really another solid performance from him because he done exactly what he was expected to do off the bench. And obviously, ultimately, you could talk about Jordan Ayew, you could talk about Martin Kelly in terms of helping us to win the game in terms of that second goal we scored, but actually it was all down to Townsend coming off the bench. He picked up the ball on the edge of the area, sort of jinked around, sent West Ham player the other direction, whipped the ball into the box, and obviously Kelly got on the end of it, headed it into the path of Ayew. So whilst he wasn't directly involved, I'm gonna call that a pre-assist, because if it wasn't for that creativity and that accuracy of that ball over the top from Townsend, we probably would have ended up drawing the game, not getting that late goal. And we'll be sitting here going, actually, it was a missed opportunity here. So it was nice to see actually Townsend come off the bench and actually make a real difference. And obviously, you know, he's obviously been on the bench the last few games or so. With positive contributions like this, it's not going to do him any harm in terms of trying to win that position back in the team. And, you know, it's a bit sad that the same can't be said for his other counterpart, and that was obviously Christian Benteke. Yes, he came on the pitch and he sort of lugged himself around, put himself about a bit, looked to try and make an impact up top, and you know, he won a header. You know, that's something I can pick out from the game. But I wasn't really impressed with the fact that maybe it wasn't lack of effort, maybe it's just the fact that he doesn't want to jog, or he doesn't want to run, or he's not being instructed to make these runs. But you know, yes, you want to put yourself about a bit, you want to be that target man up top, but if you're not going to make these runs, if you're not going to create stuff for yourself or your teammates, then there's really not, you know, no point in you being there. Because realistically, a few of the times where rather than jogging, just try and speed up a bit, just try and sprint, you know, even if you're not the fastest player, because getting on the end of chances or getting into these good positions could have made the difference. And yes, obviously we went on to win the game anyway, but when you bring someone like Benteke on, you want him to come on and make the difference, and it would have been nice to see a little bit more from him. But then likewise, I've given him no rating because, you know, coming on so late in the game, there isn't too much more he obviously could have done. Now, to be honest, just to go over sort of a small summary of the game, it was obviously nice to actually have a game where the team as a whole played really, really well. You know, I don't think there was any sort of bad performance across the field, and that's what you want to see. You know, I'd much rather have a team of average performance than have a team of 1 or 2 good performers and the rest of the team play rubbish. So it was nice to see, as a collective, as a unit, we obviously play well as a team, but individually as well, there was no one player who didn't give their all on the day. Now, I suppose what you've got to look at, and you know, this is something which I've seen people pick out on, I don't necessarily 100% agree with this, but people have been saying actually they felt that the midfield was actually better without Milivojevic. And you know, certainly the beginning of the season, end of last season, his form hasn't been great. And to be honest, you know, you've got to look at the game against West Ham and go, maybe people do have a point, because we dominated in the centre of the park. People like Chiarte and McCarthy were obviously running up and down the midfield, covering a lot of ground, making life difficult for the opposition. So whilst that was the case, I still do think the presence that Luka brings is obviously invaluable to us, not just from the penalty spot, not just as a captain, even though people may disagree.
but obviously the quality he brings in the midfield. So whilst people, and I suppose the phrase someone uses, I hate to be the one to say it, whilst people think that maybe our midfield would be better without Luka, I just think this was just a day where it looked better because the other players who came into the side obviously stepped up and made a difference. And what you've got to look at the game as a whole is that I think, if you're a West Ham fan, you're obviously going to be disappointed conceding the goal to VAR and, not taking the best, or not taking what you could from the opportunities you had. But then likewise, you've got to look at it and go, I think we ended the game with about 49% possession. So you've got to look at it and go, possession-wise, in terms of what everyone was doing on the pitch, it was almost equal. I think we had the same number of shots as West Ham. So in terms of how the game played out on paper, you'd look at it and go, yes, one team won, but it was a very fair game. Both teams were going at it. Both teams had quality, and certainly that was respective of the results. And I suppose what you've got to consider is West Ham have started the season really, really well. So the fact that we've also had a relatively good start to the season, but the fact that we were able to match them, get the better of them, as well as getting the 3 points, most importantly, was really good to see. And in terms of them stats, 49% possession and the same shots of West Ham just goes to show that it was just an equal game. Both teams have quality. It was just moments in the game where obviously we were switched on. We managed to get the penalty and of course go on to get that late goal from Ayew. Now for me, this is something to finish. Obviously not talking about the game itself, but obviously the next few months or so are really important for us because we've had a great start to the season, which is great, which means that the next few games, even if we lose them, which is going to be expected, it won't put us in a bad position because we've had that good start to the season. Obviously Man City coming up next. After that, we've got Arsenal, we've got Leicester, we've got Chelsea, we've got Liverpool. So really, really hard sort of few months coming up. And certainly I think the team, given our good start to the season, are going to relish it. But I think obviously the City game is going to be the most difficult out of them, as well as the Liverpool game. And of course, the Arsenal, Chelsea and Leicester games are equally going to be really interesting to watch because of course they are the 5 teams who are actually above us in the league, with us sitting 6th in the league. Obviously the next 5 games we're going to obviously play the 5 teams that are above us. So once again, really great to get this result against West Ham. Obviously 2 games in a row. Obviously we've got good wins, obviously against Norwich and against West Ham. Now probably not going to get a win for the next sort of month or so. So the next sort of 5 games, don't expect to be surprised if we come away from 0 points from that. But the fact that we've had a good start to the season, on the top of the fact that it was a really good performance against West Ham, obviously puts us in good stead for the games coming up. So now I'm going to move on to my Man of the Match award, but before I do that and give you my Man of the Match and who I thought the biggest influence in the game, I'm now going to give you the 4 nominations I put forward for the award. Now when you consider how good our performance was and the fact that there's not really any one player I can pick out and go, actually they had a bad performance, it really goes to show, how good the team performance was as a whole. So for me, when it came to, putting a shortlist together of the Man of the Match, it was actually quite difficult to narrow it down to 4 players. But the 4 players I've gone with is obviously a reflection of different positions across the field and of course different contributions they've made. And, I can't say this highly enough, I could have put many more players in here. I could have changed up who I've put on the shortlist, and that just goes to show how good our performance was in the fact that across the field we had decent performances. But the 4 players I've gone with Vicente Gaeta, Gary Cahill, James McArthur and Wilfred Zaha. So a nice mix there between different areas and different positions across the field. Now in terms of Vicente Gaeta, what more do I have to say? That save from Haller in particular from close range was fantastic. Other saves he made, particularly towards the end of the game to keep us in the game and keep it 2-1, they were fantastic to see. So the fact that he made it so difficult for the home side to obviously find any chances in and around the net, as well as pulling off these fantastic saves, is why I put him forward. And of course he does it week in, week out now, but just to see the class that he has, particularly when he makes these fantastic saves, was of course great to see. In terms of Gary Cahill, fantastic captain in the game in terms of controlling the defence and controlling the rest of the team. Obviously, in the early stages where West Ham were putting us under a lot of pressure, the fact that he stayed composed, was able to make clearances, and just continue that throughout the whole game. Showing that leadership, that organisation, just that grit and determination to not let anything get past him, and even if it does, obviously deal with that threat, was of course great to see as well. And in terms of picking him above other players, it's just the fact that he brought the best out of them. So whilst other players were also good, someone like Cahill, just that knowledge and experience he brings to the side seems to help the other players around him. In terms of James McArthur in the midfield, obviously arguably one of our better midfield players. Even though he normally plays slightly further forward, the fact that he completed that role, or he played in that role slightly more deeper and done it and sort of performed there to perfection, was of course great to see. And what you've got to look at is that his job was so good, he was so effective at being that extra player in front of the back four that he almost looked like another central defender, which just goes to show he was playing so good defensively that we might as well have had a back three or a back five just because of how effective he was in that defensive role. Done well up against the opposition of West Ham, was able to contain them in the midfield, make life difficult for them, which of course was great to see. And maybe it would have been nice to see him play slightly further upfield, but it goes to show how good his performance was in the fact that we can discard his attacking work for this game because his defensive work was obviously so good. And the fact that for a number of chances West Ham had throughout the game, the fact that McArthur was there, right place, right time, to obviously get in the way and break up their attacks and their bits of play up very nicely, was of course great to see. And of course the final player is Wilfried Zaha. Obviously, the amount of skill, the amount of pace he showed in the game is why I've put him forward for the award. The fact that he got the better of Aaron Cresswell in terms of that battle is obviously a positive. But just for me, even though he wasn't directly involved in the two goals we scored, obviously the penalty and of course the Jordan Ayew goal, the fact that his majestic feet created chances for us to score. The one for Slupp in particular, where he literally done all of his step overs, got past two defenders, put the ball into the box. And yes, Slupp didn't finish a chance, and Ayew had one as well that he didn't finish when he got in the end of. Even though that was the case, the fact that Zaha found himself in these positions with using his pace and skill to obviously get in behind the defence was of course great to see. And the fact that he combined that with just overall just working hard for the team was of course great to see. But for me, there is only one clear winner, and obviously when you go on to win the game 2-1, and obviously particularly towards the end of the game where they're putting on pressure in the last sort of few seconds to obviously to get that goal, the equalising goal, I'm going to give it to Vicente Guide. So congratulations Vicente, you don't get a trophy or certificate, but you do get my sincere congratulations on what was yet another solid performance from you. And the only reason I've given it to him as opposed to other players is just because of how important his saves were. The fact that he got in the way of nearly every shot West Ham had, the fact that he was punching the ball away, the fact that he was just commanding the back four to do what they have to do. So the fact that everything about his performance was obviously top quality, but then the saves as well were even better quality, is why I've put him forward obviously for the Man of the Match award, and why of course he's won my one. And you've got to look at the club's official one, and he also won that as well, which I think the general consensus is he obviously had an absolutely outstanding game. So now you've had my match report, player rankings and my Man of the Match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got interviews with Roy Hodgson, Jordan Ayew and James McCarthy following the game.
Jordan, another win and another goal for you. You must be loving your football at the moment.
Yeah. I'm buzzing. I'm enjoying myself. Like I said, the most important thing is the team, and the team have made things easy for me as well, to settle in easy, and things are going on well for all of us, so it's positive.
And do you feel comfortable now in this system this season?
Oh, I feel comfortable in this system. I feel comfortable in any system. The most important thing for me is to be on the pitch. And that's what I want. And of course, if the manager wants me to play in different positions or different system, as long as I'm on the pitch, I don't have a problem.
Cool. And this is our first win at this stadium. They're quite a tough team to play against, aren't they? How did you find it today?
Difficult team to play against, but like I said, the most important thing is to keep going. We never give up. Keep on fighting, and sometimes you're lucky. Today we're lucky because I think West Ham did a good game as well. We did a good game, but like I said, there's a 50-50 game, and today went our ways, and we're happy, and we thank God for that.
James, great win. Bit of a battle in the midfield today. How was it to be back?
Yeah, it was good to be back out there. Obviously in there with Checky and Jamesy. I thought we'd done well. We competed really well, and I thought we were deserved winners.
And it's been a long time for you, not playing for a while. How did that feel, just to get back out there? Was it a relief?
Yeah, it's been a long time. Obviously, you start to think a little bit and think, am I going to be able to go and play another game? But listen, I've come here, and the boys have been brilliant with me. The gaffer's been brilliant with me. It's a good bunch of boys, and I'm delighted to be here. And as I say, I want to get as many games as I can, but it just took a wee bit of time to get my fitness. Now I just look to try and kick on again, and as I say, try and get as many games from now to the end of the season and stay fit.
And how have you found it settling into Crystal Palace as a football club?
Yeah, it's just been brilliant. The fans have made me feel welcome. As I say, it's the boys. It's a very good bunch of boys, and I'm enjoying life here.
Roy, very good win. How do you assess the team's performance?
Well, I thought it was good. I thought, we were organised from the start. I mean, they had a lot of possession, but it was possession in front of us. They were finding it very hard to get behind us. And then after maybe 10, 12 minutes of, us really just subduing them, I thought we started to play some very good football ourselves and, get behind them, get behind their midfield players. The quality of our passing was good. A lot of 1 and 2 touch passing, a lot of good movement. And I thought at half time we were more than good value for the fact that it was 0-0. I thought, if anything, we might have taken the lead in that spell. Second half, again, started pretty much like the first had ended, but to go 1-0 behind was a bitter blow, because I don't think we really deserved to go behind at that time. The quality of our play was still good, but it was a remarkable effort to sort of shrug that off and get going again and score 2 goals, albeit the second one, of course, came with the help of a linesman's flag, which awarded West Ham the decision for offside at the stadium, but it was overturned by VAR.
We're 4th after 8 games. Well, at the start of the season, you probably would have taken that, right?
Yeah, you can say that again, but there's games coming up tomorrow, isn't there? So that would change things as well. I don't think where you are in the table is of great interest at this stage of the season. It would be nice if someone decides to abandon the league now, and whether people are, that's the position they end at, but they don't. They require us to play another 30 games, and so much can happen in those 30 games, and we are all fully aware of that. But the important thing today, I think, was that we got a good 3 points, a very good victory. I thought the quality of our play deserved it, so we don't have to apologise for anything in that. So it wasn't a fortunate one. It wasn't one where we've been absolutely under the cosh for 90 minutes and have nicked a goal. Far from it, really. There was long periods where I thought, we looked like the more composed team. And to come to the London Stadium, 60,000 people, West Ham, big investors these days, brought in some very good quality players. A team that has a little bit of an Indian sign hanging over us because we don't beat them very often. To come here and get this victory in the way we got this victory, I think was fantastic.
And McCarthy came in for Luca today. How do you think he did?
He was great. He was MacArthur, who moved more central, was superb, and he did exactly the sort of job that Luke has been doing for us. And McCarthy did exactly the job that James MacArthur has been doing for us. So in actual fact, we in a seam-free way covered the loss of Luka Milivojevic, who was suspended for the game. And for McCarthy, he must be absolutely delighted, because it's a long while since he's actually started a game, and yet, to be frank, there's no way anyone who didn't know that watching the game would have guessed it. I would think perhaps quite the reverse. They probably would have thought he's been playing every match of every season for the past 2.
And one last question. Patrick van Aanholt steps up to take the penalty in Luca's absence. Is that your decision, or is that do they decide that amongst them?
No, it was a decision that was made in the team meeting. I made it clear we need a penalty taker, and I said to Patrick van Aanholt, "Do you take penalties? Are you comfortable taking penalties?" And he said he did. And then I asked if anyone else, would be interested if, for some reason, he wasn't able to, and a couple of other guys put their hands up then, and I was able to choose a second one as well. But it was good that Patrick, took the responsibility. There was a bit of a delay, so it wasn't easy for him. But he repaid, if you like, my and the team's faith in him as a good striker of the ball to make certain he puts it in the net from 12 yards.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Roy Hodgson, Jordan Ayew and James McCarthy had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against West Ham. But make sure to come back in the next 2 weeks for my post-match review of the game against Manchester City. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace.